Ready for a deep dive that's going to send us straight into a cosmic showdown.
I am.
It's Newton versus Huygens.
Oh, I love it.
We're tackling excerpts from Great Books of the Western World, Volume 34. Got some seriously heavy hitters in there.
Oh, yeah.
Newton's Principia,
Classic.
some of Huygens' greatest hits.
Yeah, we're talking about the nature of the universe kind of stuff.
This is like stepping into a time machine, listening to these guys debate.
Right, and it's more than just science.
It's not just like, oh, here are the facts.
No, it's a clash of worldviews, really. Two totally different ways of seeing everything.
And to make things even more interesting, we're bringing in a philosophical dream team to weigh in on all this.
Okay, lay it on me. Who do we have?
We've got Socrates,
Right.
Joe Rogan, Kanye West,
Whoa.
and Nietzsche.
Okay, now that's a dinner party I would love to be a fly on the wall for.
Oh, yeah. But before we bring in the heavy hitters of philosophy, let's set the stage right.
Let's do it.
So Newton paints this picture of the universe as a perfectly ordered machine,
Okay.
governed by absolute mathematical laws. I mean, he called his book Principia for a reason.
Right, principles. It's all about the fundamentals, the foundation of everything.
And he doesn't mess around. Like, right off the bat, he starts Principia by laying down some serious definitions.
Oh, yeah. He's very precise. Wants to make sure everyone's on the same page from the get-go.
Yeah, he talks about this quantity of matter, which we now call mass, and how it relates to weight.
That's huge, because that's a distinction that a lot of people, even today, still kind of get confused about. You know, they use the terms interchangeably. But Newton, he's like, nope, these are two separate things.
Yeah.
Weight, that's the force of gravity pulling on something.
Right.
But mass, that's inherent to the object itself. Doesn't matter where you are, how much gravity's around, the mass is constant.
Actually, yeah.
And Newton, to prove his point, he designed these really meticulous experiments with pendulums to demonstrate this. He was all about the evidence.
He was really backing it up.
Oh, absolutely.
He also dives into this concept of vis sensita, which means inherent force.
Right. So we know that today as inertia. Basically, an object at rest, it wants to stay at rest.
Okay.
And an object in motion, it wants to stay in motion. Same speed, same direction, unless some outside force acts on it.
So that's like when the bus slams on its brakes and you lurch forward.
Exactly. Your body, it's like, nope, I'm going to keep going this speed, thanks, until that seatbelt catches you, of course.
Right.
But those foundational concepts, they form the basis for his famous laws of motion. 3 of them. They describe how objects move and interact.
Okay, break it down. Law number 1.
All right, so the first law of motion, it basically states that an object at rest will stay at rest. An object in motion, it'll stay in motion at a constant speed and in a straight line unless some external force acts on it.
So without gravity, the planets would just keep going in a straight line.
Exactly. It's the sun's gravity that's constantly pulling them, keeping them in orbit. Otherwise, they just zoom off into space.
And what about like a cannonball?
Cannonball, same idea.
Yeah.
If you fired a cannonball in a world without gravity and air resistance, it would just keep traveling in a straight line forever. But in the real world, we have those forces acting on it. Air slows it down, gravity pulls it back to Earth.
So that leads to the second law.
Right, the second law of motion. And this one gets into how a force changes an object's motion. So we're talking about acceleration here, the change in motion.
How much it speeds up, slows down, or changes direction.
Exactly. And Newton says that acceleration is directly proportional to the force applied. More force, more acceleration. Simple. Right.
Okay, so like pushing a shopping cart.
Exactly. The harder you push, the faster it speeds up. Or think about a car. More gas, more acceleration.
I get it.
See? Physics isn't so scary. And then we get to the third law, the one everyone knows. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Like the law of karma.
Haha. In a way, yeah. But it's more than just what goes around comes around. This law explains how things stay balanced. Think about the Earth and the Moon. They're constantly pulling on each other with gravity.
Right.
But because those forces are equal and opposite, the moon stays in orbit. It's a beautiful dance, really.
So Newton's universe is all about order, predictability, laws that can't be broken.
Right. Very clockwork.
Yeah. But then along comes Huygens, and he's got a different perspective, especially when it comes to light.
Yeah, Huygens, he was all about the wave theory of light. He's saying light doesn't travel in straight lines like little particles, which is what a lot of people thought at the time.
Including Newton.
Including Newton, yeah. But Huygens is like, no, no, no. Light spreads out like waves, similar to waves in water.
Okay, so instead of light being like little bullets, it's more like ripples spreading out.
Exactly. Think
Right.
about dropping a pebble into a pond, those ripples that move outward. That's what Huygens is proposing light is doing. And to back up this theory, he conducted experiments and he showed that light could bend around corners. We call that diffraction.
Okay.
You can't bend a bullet around a corner.
So how did Newton try to explain this?
Well, Newton, he tried to come up with explanations within his particle theory, but it didn't quite fit. Huygens' experiments really threw a wrench in the works. This was a big deal.
Yeah, we have two geniuses here, both with solid evidence, but completely different pictures of how the universe works.
Right. Newton is giving us this beautifully ordered, predictable universe.
Oh, right.
While Huygens brings in this sense of fluidity, of things behaving in unexpected ways.
It's like choosing between a perfectly tuned orchestra and a wild, unpredictable jazz band.
Now that's a great analogy. And that's where our philosophical dream team comes in. Imagine Socrates, Joe Rogan, Kanye, and Nietzsche all gathered around listening to this debate unfold. What do you think they'd say?
Oh, I can't wait to hear their take on all of this.
Let's dive in. So you know how we were talking about those pendulum experiments Newton used to differentiate between mass and weight?
Oh, yeah.
It just blows my mind how he connected those findings back to his definition of quantity of matter. He's not just throwing out definitions all willy-nilly.
No.
He's creating this intricate web of thought, you know?
Yeah, he's building a system.
Exactly. It wasn't enough for him to just describe these concepts. He had to rigorously test them, prove their relationship. It really shows his dedication to empirical evidence, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, he's not just theorizing from his armchair. He's out there getting his hands dirty.
Exactly. And it's this commitment to observation and experimentation. It really lays the groundwork for modern science as we know it. But even with all this meticulous work, Newton wasn't immune to challenge. Enter Huygens and his wave theory of light.
Right. It's wild to think that something as fundamental as the nature of light was up for debate.
Oh, absolutely. For Newton, it was all about those tiny particles. But Huygens, he's all about the waves.
Wave.
And those experiments he conducted, especially the ones showing diffraction, they really poked holes in Newton's particle theory. Diffraction, that's where light bends around obstacles, creating those cool patterns of light and dark bands.
I've seen that.
It's classic wave behavior.
Okay, so how did Newton try to explain this if light was supposed to be made of particles? I mean, you can't just bend particles around a corner, right?
He tried, he really did. He argued that the particles were being deflected by forces at the edges of objects, but Huygens wasn't buying it. He pointed out that if light were really particles, they would collide and scatter, not create those neat diffraction patterns.
That's like two totally different languages trying to describe the same thing.
Yeah, it's like two completely different paradigms clashing. You have Newton with his vision of a universe governed by precise mathematical laws, everything in its place, behaving predictably.
Yeah.
And then you have Huygens suggesting a universe with more fluidity, where even light itself can behave in unexpected ways.
It's like choosing between a perfectly manicured garden and a wild, untamed forest.
Ooh, that's a good one. And speaking of wild and untamed, let's bring our philosophical dream team back into the mix. Socrates, Joe, Kanye, Nietzsche, they've been patiently listening to this scientific showdown. What do you make of all this? Socrates, can math truly explain everything about the universe like Newton seems to believe?
I mean, can an equation explain love? Or the beauty of a sunset? Those are things that can't be quantified.
Exactly. Socrates would be pushing us to look beyond the purely quantifiable aspects of the universe, to grapple with the bigger questions of meaning and purpose. What about you, Joe? Those light experiments must have your mind spinning.
I bet he's like, whoa, if light can act like both a particle and a wave, doesn't that mean our observation, changes reality itself? What does it say about consciousness, man?
Ha ha, I can hear him saying it now. He'd be drawing connections to quantum mechanics and the observer effect, maybe even speculating about the nature of reality itself. What about Kanye? I bet he's feeling pretty smug about Huygens' wave theory.
Oh, absolutely. He's probably thinking, see, I told you. Those laws are for ordinary people. My music operates on a whole other frequency. I'm bending those Newtonian laws with my creative genius.
Haha, he'd be all about embracing the fluidity and unpredictability of the universe, just like those waves of light bending around corners. And last but not least, we have Nietzsche. What's his take on all this?
I think he'd praise both Newton and Huygens for their boldness, for challenging the status quo. But he might also warn against becoming slaves to order, whether that order is defined by mathematical laws or by any other rigid system.
I can see that. He was all about pushing boundaries, embracing the chaos. He might argue that true power comes from embracing the dynamism of the universe, the constant becoming, rather than trying to impose a fixed and unchanging structure on it. He might see Huygens' wave theory as a step towards acknowledging that.
It's that tension between order and chaos, between predictability and uncertainty, that makes this whole debate so fascinating.
Absolutely. It goes way beyond just light or gravity. It's about how we view ourselves, our place in the universe, the big questions.
It's like, do we want to live in a perfectly ordered garden where every plant is neatly trimmed in a designated spot?
Or do we want to venture into a wild and untamed forest where things are constantly growing and changing? And that brings us back to Newton's Principia, where he introduces another key concept: quantity of motion. We know it today as momentum.
Momentum.
It's tied to his second law of motion. The more momentum an object has, the harder it is to stop or change its direction.
So like a bowling ball thundering down the lane, it's going to take a lot to stop that.
Exactly. And Newton goes on to define different types of forces, including centripetal force. That's the force that pulls objects towards a center. Think about the planets orbiting the sun. That's gravity acting as a centripetal force, keeping those planets in check.
It's amazing how he was able to connect all these seemingly disparate phenomena, from bowling balls to planets, even the tides. He was building a unified theory of the universe.
He was.
Yeah.
And that theory had a massive impact on the development of modern science and technology. Engineering, architecture, space exploration, it all goes back to those principles Newton articulated centuries ago. But of course, our understanding of the universe didn't end with Newton, right?
Of course not.
Einstein came along with his theory of relativity, which challenged some of Newton's assumptions, especially when you're dealing with huge masses and super high speeds. And then quantum mechanics came along and blew everyone's minds with even weirder concepts, like particles existing in multiple states at the same time.
Right.
It reminds us that scientific knowledge is always evolving, always building upon, and sometimes even overturning the work of those who came before. And that spirit of inquiry, that drive to question and test, is what keeps us moving forward.
Absolutely. So where does that leave us? Is the universe ultimately this perfectly predictable machine that Newton envisioned?
Yeah.
Or is there room for chaos, for uncertainty, for the unexpected?
Let's throw that question back to our philosophical roundtable. Socrates, Joe, Kanye, Nietzsche. What do you think? Is there some grand unifying principle that governs everything? Or is the universe ultimately this wild, unpredictable dance of energy and matter? It's amazing how those basic concepts Newton laid out in Principia, like mass, inertia, forces, they became the foundation for his theory of universal gravitation.
You mean the force that makes apples fall from trees and keeps the planets in orbit?
That's the one. It was a revolutionary idea at the time, this invisible force acting across huge distances.
Yeah.
But Newton, he showed mathematically how it all worked, how the strength of that force depends on the mass of the objects and the distance between them.
Okay, so the Earth's gravity is stronger than the Moon's because the Earth has more mass.
Exactly. And the closer you are to an object, the stronger its gravitational pull.
Yeah.
Newton gave us this framework for understanding this fundamental force of nature, and it's a framework that's still relevant today.
Even with all the advances of Einstein and quantum mechanics.
Even then. So Newton, he's basically saying the universe is this giant clockwork mechanism, everything running according to these fixed laws.
Like a perfectly predictable machine.
Exactly. But then that raises some big questions, right?
Like what?
Well, if everything's predetermined by these laws, do we really have free will?
Or are we just cogs in a giant cosmic machine?
Exactly. What did Newton himself think about all this? Well, he was a deeply religious man. He believed that God, as the creator of the universe and its laws, knew everything that would ever happen.
So in Newton's view, the universe is like a movie that's already been made.
In a way, yes. But even with this deterministic view, Newton still believed that humans had a role to play.
How so?
He thought that through reason and observation, we could understand those laws and use that knowledge to shape our world.
It's like saying, okay, we can't change the rules of the game, but we can learn how to play it really well.
Exactly. And that idea that we could unlock the secrets of the universe through scientific inquiry, it was incredibly powerful. It fueled the Enlightenment, the scientific revolution, this belief that progress was possible if we just applied our minds to the task.
It's kind of inspiring, actually.
It is this idea that we're not just passive observers, that we have the power to understand and potentially even manipulate the world around us. And that brings us back to our philosophical dream team. We've been talking about gravity, light, the nature of the universe, but let's not forget about the human element here.
The drive to create, to leave our mark on the world.
Exactly. Tanya, what do you think about all this? Do these universal laws make you feel limited, or do they inspire you to push the boundaries even further?
Knowing Kanye, he'd probably say those laws are for ordinary people.
Right. He might say his music operates on a completely different plane of existence.
Yeah.
He might argue that true creativity is about bending the rules, about finding new ways to express yourself, even if it means defying the establishment. And who knows? Maybe he's right. I mean, didn't Huygens do something similar with his wave theory of light? He challenged the accepted view and opened up a whole new way of understanding the universe.
It's like both scientific discoveries and artistic breakthroughs often come from questioning the status quo, from looking at things differently.
Right. And Socrates would be all over that, challenging assumptions, provoking people to think critically. He might say that even if Newton's laws accurately describe how the universe works, they don't necessarily tell us everything about what the universe means.
Yeah, those bigger questions about purpose, consciousness, the things that can't be easily explained by equations.
Exactly. And then we have Nietzsche. He'd probably remind us that the universe isn't static, it's constantly evolving, and so should our understanding of it.
So is the universe this harmonious symphony of order? Or is it a chaotic dance of randomness?
Maybe it's both. Maybe it's about finding the balance between those two forces, the predictable and the unpredictable. That's what makes the universe so fascinating, so endlessly intriguing.
It's what drives us to keep exploring, to keep asking those big questions.
So, which vision of the universe resonates most with you? Do you find comfort in the order of Newton's clockwork model, or do you embrace the fluidity of Huygens' wave theory? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Join the conversation online and keep diving deep into those big questions about the universe and our place in it. Until next time, keep exploring.